Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Marissa with me today, and we're going to be talking about the idea behind a fractional workforce. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Absolutely. Marissa Buckley. I'm co-founder and managing partner at Brilliantly. We're a growth firm and we help insurtechs build, grow, and scale. We also offer fractional chief growth officer services. So one of the great services that we provide is an agile go-to-market actionable plan. And we've got a team of people on board to implement that plan as well. So it's perfectly suited for early stage insurtech startup companies to get just the right foundation to go to market. In the insurance industry for 15 years, I worked for a startup insurance carrier and oversaw innovation for that carrier. We had a really wonderful tech innovation group and a really lofty budget for several years. And we developed several industry firsts and allowed us to grow to become the second largest in our market. So I've taken that expertise and insight and now bringing that to the insurtech side of the business.
Well, I'm super excited to have you. And obviously, based off of what you do for a living, you're pretty well suited to have this conversation about fractional workforce and how we can start to adopt a little bit more of that in the insurance space. But one of the things that I want to kind of set the stage before we get right into it and talk through. So in the insurance industry, we're constantly hearing about a talent gap. Then we're hearing about layoffs and the questionable economy and all the things that are going on at like a macro level. And these are kind of like competing ideas with one another. So how do we go about making sense of all of this and finding solutions to kind of help meet the need on both ends?
So really great point. It's so confusing, isn't it? Like you're seeing all these articles with all of these layoffs, I mean, across industries in big tech and in insurance. But then at the same time, we've been talking about a talent crisis since I've been in the industry, since the boomer generations, this large demographic group getting ready to retire. Now we've got a couple of other things happening as well, which is this growing gig economy and the Great Resignation. So it is really, really confusing. But a couple of things that I want to note about what's really going on in terms of research and what we can expect in the workforce. There is a workforce expert. Her name is Cheryl Cran. If you're not following her, you should. She is the founder of Next Mapping. And she has extensive information, consults with businesses on evolving their workforces. And she's got a lot of great insight around how the workforce is changing. So with that research that she has through McKinsey shows that there's going to be a worker shortage until 2030. And according to Microsoft, 77% of leaders are focused on creating a customized hybrid workplace strategy. So with that, if you've got this worker shortage and you've got all of these layoffs with probably most likely driven by the uncertainty that we're all living with now, what is actually going to take place? And I kind of liken the change to how we evolved and adopted Zoom. So if you go back to pre-pandemic and you think about how often you use Zoom, and then with COVID, how much we use Zoom during that period, but then how much we're still using it now. Like if you really think about it, when's the last time that you had just a phone call with someone when it came to business? So you see this evolution that's accelerated by something, and then you see it completely change the way that you work. I see this same thing happening with this talent shortage that's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. She also mentions that there was an Oxford study where there's 21% increase in freelance work in the last year and expected to be much greater this year. So you've got this big, massive growing gig economy. You've got this mindset of people who are wanting to focus more on mental health and well-being. They want greater flexibility in their lives. So naturally, with this shortage in place, I think what we're going to see is companies are going to have to look at different options that are available out there to fill those gaps But like Zoom, as a result of that, those options that are out there are much better and much more conducive to more productivity, lower costs, all of those things. And one of those options is the role of the fractional interim executive and the value that that can bring to companies today. I think you'll see more companies having to adopt that, but then seeing the benefits of that and figuring out how to bring them into the fold of their company, and then not really deviating at that even far after there is no employee shortage.
So I want to dive into that idea that you just opened up in terms of how a fractional executive can come in, and maybe even just a little bit of that idea of the gig economy in general, and how we can start adopting that within the insurance industry to start working through some of these challenges that we're seeing.
So that is the other piece. So it's almost like we've got all these ecosystems in place in insurance, which we all kind of feel, with all of these different insurtechs and these different business needs, and regionalized and disparate for whatever multiple reasons. And now it's like we're living in an economy of bringing these ecosystems together, making the connection. And in this case, with the workforce and the evolution of that, a fractional interim executive is a C-level executive with decision-making authority, and they're actually integrated into the culture. They're developing project plans. There's a lot of transparency around the work that they're doing. They have deliverables, and they're overseeing teams. And that's far different than an advisor that comes in, that's providing, that's coaching and giving, developing strategy. This is really a team member that's integrated into your workforce on a fractional basis. It might be 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week, whatever that is. Now you've got these companies that are popping up. And I just spoke with someone yesterday who built their company to pull together the gig economy to offer tailored niche services to the fractional executive so that they can bring it to their clients and to the market. So, and you're seeing these sort of crop up all over the place, which is really that ecosystem of the gig economy now coming together with this layer of interim executives that's going to make it easy for companies to integrate a lot of services, get a lot of things done, and increase productivity without having to go through that process of looking for permanent talent and the aches and pains of hiring somebody who isn't necessarily a cultural fit that you find out later on. So with a fractional executive, it's connecting with the ecosystem, but then it also could be a layer into your business, even when you've got those, you don't have vacancies with roles. Maybe you might bring in a fractional executive for professional development for a like executive, a CMO within an organization. You could bring in a fractional executive for 3 months, 6 months, and go through this coaching and bring all new insight, all new perspectives. So there's multiple ways that you can leverage in your business. But I think for insurance, it's connecting all those different specialized digital marketing, growth marketing, analytics, which is huge. There's this whole G4 thing that's happening in July that everybody's got to adapt to. Well, a fractional executive could bring those analysts to a company. Why would you don't need a full-time marketing analyst for G4? You just need it for a time period to set it up, and then you transition that to your internal team, which gives you greater agility and flexibility within your organization. It's just a different way of thinking and not allowing yourself to fall into the trap of thinking that they're like advisors, because they're not.
So you mentioned this idea of culture, and I think where I'd like to take the discussion is talking through the importance of vision and values, like at the core of an organization before you start making this move to bring people in from outside the organization to start filling these roles and really taking advantage of this model. Can you talk a little bit more about that idea?
Yes. So as part of our process, when we're working with clients, so we have a variety of different clients with different goals. Some of them have a lot of competition and some of them don't, and just have really different objectives that they want us to help achieve. And then we go through this process with them of looking at their vision, refining it, or sometimes redefining it, and then pulling in the values. We actually have like this online digital form that they can use where they can vote on some values. And based on the results of their team doing this anonymously, we can see what their real core values are attributed to their current culture. But when you put all of that together, you define this vision, you define the values, and you bring that into your organization, it is paramount for your internal teams, but also these fractional executives and the on-demand ad hoc services that they're bringing to your company, because it gives people a high-level view and goal of what they need to achieve, but then the values of how to really work with your team and how to evolve with your team as they're going from company to company. So that piece really is core to maximizing the success of everything that you do. Without it, you might stumble into different ways of working with a company that may have completely different values. It also helps the fractional executive to recruit the right team member who has similar values, because we're doing all of those things as well, so that we can build a seamless pod of people to bring into a company where we're all starting off on the same page. We all have a clear understanding of what the vision of the company is. And all of that ties into and shapes all the tactical work that we do. So hugely critical first step. And it's one of the first questions that we ask. And a lot of times what we find is, the vision isn't really a vision, there's a lot of joy in that too, because we get to work with the company to help them create a new vision, and it's true to who they are. And then once we have that, it just makes the whole process a lot easier, much more valuable, and the relationship overall is just better.
Thank you so much for joining me for the conversation. And if you're not already, make sure you make your way over to Marissa's LinkedIn, give her a follow there, and join in on these types of conversations that we're having in comments and back and forth on a regular basis. But thank you so much for joining me again, Marissa, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.